Inside a blinding wall of white, two of the world's largest aircraft are hurtling toward each other on a single, narrow strip of asphalt. Neither pilot can see the other. Neither knows they are seconds away from an inescapable inferno. 583 lives, a legendary captain under immense pressure, and a 3-second squeal of radio static that would change the world forever. This wasn't a mechanical failure. It was a perfect storm of ego, fog, and a single fatal word. Today, we step into the whiteout of the Tenerife disaster. On a Sunday afternoon in the spring of 1977, the island of Tenerife was swallowed by a wall of white. It wasn't a typical mist. It was an orographic fog, a thick, heavy cloud that clings to the volcanic peaks and spills onto the tarmac like a slow-moving flood. At Los Rodeos Airport, visibility was dying. Inside that haze, two of the largest machines ever built by man, two Boeing 747 jumbo jets, were moving toward one another on the same narrow strip of asphalt. Neither crew could see the other. Neither knew that in the next few minutes they would become the center of the deadliest disaster in the history of aviation. The tragedy did not begin on the runway. It began with a flower shop miles away on the island of Gran Canaria. At 12:30 p.m., a bomb planted by a separatist group exploded in the terminal of Las Palmas Airport. While the blast caused only minor injuries, the threat of a second device forced the immediate closure of the island's primary hub. Dozens of international flights, filled with thousands of holidaymakers, were suddenly diverted to the nearest alternative, Los Rodeos. Los Rodeos was never meant for this. It was a small, regional facility with a single runway and a parallel taxiway that was essentially a narrow driveway for planes. As the diverted giants descended, the airport's apron became a claustrophobic maze. Planes were parked wingtip to wingtip, completely blocking the main taxiway. To take off, a plane would now have to do something inherently dangerous. It would have to back taxi, driving all the way down the active runway, performing a massive 180-degree turn at the end, and then thundering back the way it came. Among the crowd of aircraft sat two titans. One was KLM Flight 4805, a blue and white Boeing 747 named the Rhine. At its controls was Captain Jakob Veldhausen van Zanten. In the world of aviation, van Zanten was more than a pilot. He was an icon. He was KLM's chief flight instructor, the face of their advertising campaigns, and the man who literally wrote the safety manuals for the airline. He was brilliant, but he was also under immense pressure. New Dutch laws had recently tightened duty time limits. If Van Zanten didn't get his plane off the ground soon, he and his crew would exceed their legal hours. The penalty wasn't just a fine, it was potential criminal prosecution and the loss of his license. As the minutes ticked away, Van Zanten's focus narrowed to one thing: departure. Parked just behind the KLM jet was Pan Am Flight 1736, the Clipper Victor. Its captain, Victor Grubbs, was a veteran with over 21,000 hours of flight time. His passengers were mostly elderly retirees, excited for a Mediterranean cruise. They were so close to the KLM jet that the Pan Am crew actually had to get out of their cockpit and pace off the distance between their wingtip and the KLM's tail. They were just 12 feet short of being able to squeeze past. They were trapped, forced to wait for the KLM's star to move first. While they waited, Van Zanten made a decision that would change everything. He decided to refuel his massive jet right there in Tenerife. He thought it would save time later at Gran Canaria, but the process took 35 minutes and added 55 tons of weight to the aircraft. Those 35 minutes were fatal. While the fuel pumped into the KLM's tanks, the clear skies over Los Rodeos vanished. The fog rolled in, thick and blinding, reducing visibility from miles to mere hundreds of meters. As the refueling finished, a final delay occurred. A missing Dutch family of 4 had to be tracked down in the terminal and brought back to the KLM jet. At the same time, one passenger, a tour guide named Robina van Lanschot, made a choice that defies logic. She lived on Tenerife and decided it was foolish to fly to Gran Canaria only to fly back the next day. Despite airline rules, seconds, she walked off the plane and disappeared into the island. She would be the only person from the KLM manifest to survive the day. Finally, at 4:58 p.m., the movement began. The KLM jet was cleared to backtrack down the runway. The Pan Am jet was told to follow it a few hundred meters behind and instructed to exit the runway at the third intersection to clear the way for KLM's takeoff. But the intersections weren't marked. In the notorious fog, the Pan Am crew struggled to find their way. The third exit, taxiway C3, required a difficult 135-degree turn that seemed nearly impossible for a jumbo jet. Confused and blinded, they crept past C3, searching instead for the easier angle of C4. They were still on the runway, lost in the whiteout. At the end of the runway, Van Santen completed his 180-degree turn. He was ready. He pushed the throttles forward. His first officer, Klaas Meurs, a man who had once been Van Santen's student, felt the surge and spoke up. "Wait a minute, we don't have an ATC clearance." Van Santen pulled the engines back. "No, I know that. Go ahead, ask." Meurs requested the clearance. The tower responded with the route instructions, the path they were to take after they were in the air. It was not a clearance to take off, but Meurs, perhaps feeling the captain's urgency, ended his transmission with the ambiguous phrase, "We are now at takeoff." In the tower, the controller heard this and thought the KLM was standing still, waiting. He replied, "Okay, stand by for takeoff. I will call you." At that exact second, the Pan Am crew, hearing the KLM report, grew terrified. First Officer Robert Bragg keyed his mic and shouted, "And we're still taxiing down the runway, the Clipper 1736. In any other moment, these two warnings would have stopped the disaster. But because they happened at the exact same time, on the same frequency, the signals clashed. In the KLM cockpit, instead of hearing the tower's "stand by" or Pan Am's "still taxiing," the pilots heard only a 3-second-long, high-pitched shrill, radio static known as a heterodyne. The only word that made it through was "okay." Van Santen didn't wait. He pushed the 4 massive engines to full power. The 350-ton jet began to groan and roll. In the back of the KLM cockpit, the flight engineer, Willem Schroeder, felt a chill. He had heard a snippet of the Pan Am transmission. "Is he not clear then, that Pan American?" Van Santen didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said emphatically. He was the master. He was the face of the airline. He was certain. 2 kilometers away, the Pan Am pilots were squinting into the mist. Suddenly, Captain Grubbs saw something that made his blood run cold. 2 points of light, then 4. The landing lights of a 747 were emerging from the fog, charging directly at them at 160 miles per hour. "There he is! Look at him! God damn, that son of a bitch is coming!" Grubbs screamed. He slammed the throttles forward, trying to steer the massive Clipper Victor into the grass, a desperate attempt to get out of the way. In the KLM cockpit, Van Santen finally saw the silhouette of the Pan Am jet across the runway. It was too late to stop. He pulled back on the control column with everything he had. The tail of the KLM jet slammed into the asphalt, gouging a 20-meter scar into the runway as he tried to leapfrog the Pan Am. The KLM lifted. Its nose cleared the Pan Am's fuselage, but the extra 55 tons of fuel he had taken on earlier weighed the plane down. The KLM's main landing gear and its right engines ripped through the upper deck of the Pan Am jet like a hot knife through a sardine can. The impact was a metallic scream that echoed through the fog. The KLM jet, its belly torn open, remained airborne for a few seconds before stalling and crashing 150 meters away. It didn't just crash, it exploded. The 55,000 liters of fuel Van Santen had insisted on taking on turned the rain into a massive, inescapable fireball. All 248 people on board were killed instantly. On the Pan Am jet, the scene was a nightmare. Purser Dorothy Kelly was standing in the front when the floor simply vanished. She fell through the cabin into the dark cargo hold below. When she climbed back out through a sliver of light, she looked up and saw the sky. The roof of the plane was gone. "We've got to jump!" she shouted to the dazed passengers. The fire was spreading with a terrifying roar. People began leaping from the wings, a 20-foot drop onto jagged metal and burning debris. Robert Bragg, the Pan Am first officer, stood on the wing and watched as the engines of his plane continued to scream at full power. The control cables had been severed, and there was no way to shut them down. Rescue crews at the airport saw the glow of the fire through the fog, but they had no idea there were two planes. They spent precious minutes fighting the flames of the KLM wreck, unaware that just a few hundred meters away, survivors from the Pan Am flight were wandering through the haze, covered in soot and blood, looking for help. When the mist finally cleared and the flames died down, the true scale of the horror was revealed. 583 people were dead. It remains to this day the worst accident in the history of flight. The investigation that followed changed the world. It gave birth to aviation English, ensuring that the word takeoff is never used until the moment a plane is truly cleared to go. It created crew resource management, a culture where a junior officer is not only allowed but required to challenge a legendary captain if they see a mistake.